Good morning, y'all. We are going to make some sourdough bread today. So basically what I'm doing here is I am taking some of my starter out and putting it into the bowl to prepare for my loaf of bread. In this case, I'm only going to make one loaf today. So I'm taking out enough starter and placing it into my bowl and measuring out the grams to have enough sourdough starter for my sourdough loaf that I'm making. Once I get that all measured out, then I'll scrape my spoon off to make sure that I get all the sourdough either in the bowl that I'm using or back into the container. So here I got a little bit too much, so I'm taking it out and putting it back into my starter container just so that I have the appropriate amount of grams. And you can do this. You just have to play with your scale and you play with your starter until you get the appropriate amount that you need. And as I said, I'm just scraping it off now, putting it back into the jar. I'm trying not to touch it because I don't want to change its consistency with its probiotics, good bacteria, because it does take out bad bacteria. So I want to keep as much good bacteria as I can and not contaminate it. So I'm using a scraper off of my spoon. So now I'm going to get my water and I'm going to pour that into the starter that I've already put into the bowl. I've reset my scale so I can make sure to get the appropriate grams into this bowl. When I finish that, then I will move on to adding my flour. Sometimes the scale can be a little finicky, so we have to do a little bit at a time till we get the appropriate amount of grams, because once you get it in there, it's a little harder to take it out. Now I'm going to grab a spoon that I'm going to use to take the flour out of the bag and put it into the bowl so I can better control how many grams I'm actually putting into the bowl. So before I started to put the flour in, I reset my scale again so that I could measure the appropriate amount of grams for this particular loaf of bread that I am making. So I'm going to continue to put the flour into the bowl until I get the appropriate amount of grams. As we get towards or close to the amount that I need, you'll see that I start to put smaller and smaller amounts into the bowl very slowly, very easily, so that way I can make sure to get the appropriate amount. Now we're going to move into stirring, and I'm going to go back to my wooden spoon that I was using and move the scale out of the way, and I'm going to stir it up very carefully because it's kind of liquidy and the flour will poof everywhere. So you're going to stir it up until you get like a good little pancake mixture. It might be a little thicker than a pancake mixture. Make sure that you try to get as much of the flour off the side of the bowl and bottom of the bowl that you can. And again, I'm going to use the spoon because I'm trying to avoid adding any other bacteria other than the good bacteria that already exists in the starter itself. So I'm going to mix that together really well. And as you see, I slop it around quite a bit, not trying to, but slowly. The slower you are, the better. Slowly mix it around until you get a thicker consistency for the bread. As you can see, this takes a few minutes, and that's perfectly okay. Take your time, try to blend in all the flour that's in the bowl because it will stick to the bottom and it will stick to the side. So just kind of keep rolling the bread around, picking up as much of the flour as you can. So again, when I get it mixed up, I'm trying not to touch it. So I use a spoon or I use something to scrape it off the wooden spoon back into the bowl. And then this is what it looks like. Now we cover it and we let it sit. When we come back, we're adding our salt and a little bit more water to the mixture. And once we do that, we're going to mix it in. And then we're going to let it rest again for a period of time. You have to measure the salt again on your scale. So you put your container on, you set it to 0, you measure out your salt, and then you're going to put your salt in your bread and mix it around. I use my hands starting at this point in time. It's just easier because the bread is now a little tougher. It's not so watery. So now I start to use my hands to mix things into the bread. Now I'm adding the water, or measuring out the water to go into the dough with the salt. In this particular case, if I get too much, I can scoop some out with a little spoon and then add back in so I get the appropriate measured amount in grams to add to the dough. When I do this, I'm going to pour it in to the dough, and then I'm going to begin mixing it around with my hands. Then in this case, I just kind of keep folding the dough over into itself, moving the salt around, getting the water added into it. This is how I did it. Other people may do it a little differently, and that's okay. But basically the idea is we're trying to get the salt and the water into the mixture. Fine salt is the best. I've tried to use coarse salt and it doesn't really dissolve. So you definitely want to use fine sea salt, and make sure that your water is kind of more room temperature or warm. It just mixes in better with the dough. So once you get it all mixed in, we're gonna cover it and let it sit again. All right, so now we're gonna do the first set of 4 sets of stretch and fold. So what you're gonna do is you're going to pick up the dough on one side, you're gonna stretch it, and then you're gonna fold it over to itself, turn the bowl a quarter turn, stretch it again, fold it over itself, and then you're gonna keep doing that quarter turns each time till you do all 4 sides of the dough. We're adding some air in here, we're stretching it out, and you're gonna do this 3 to 4 times. But what you're going to do is do it once on all 4 sides, cover, let it sit for 30 minutes, set your timer, come back in 30 more minutes and do it again. And as I said, you're going to do this 3 to 4 times. Once you've done all 4 sets of stretch and fold, then you're going to let it sit up for 4 to 12 hours. You're going to let it sit at room temperature until it's doubled in size. Helpful tip. Do not wash any of the tools you use during bread making down the sink. You need to let them soak in water, get them really soft, wipe them off, pour the water out outside, and then wash them off. If it goes down your drain, it will just dry and make a cement, and your plumber will not be happy. Catch me in the next video so we can show you what to do once the dough rises.